1932. Big kind of fight for land rights. But I guess like today in 2023, like access to outdoor spaces is still mitigated by legalities, but also by other things like disability, ethnicity, class. Oh, yay for the captions! Hooray, thank you. And yeah, so we wanted to sort of have a few discussions about like what access to the outdoors means, and particularly how poetry and music might have something to say about this. So we've got three wonderful poets that are going to read for you. We've got Polly Atkin, Jonathan Davidson and L Kiew. And then we've also got the folk duo Lucy and Hazel, who are going to perform some music for you. We'll have our three readers first, then we'll have a very short interval, and then we'll all have a little bit of a discussion. You'll have a chance to ask questions if you would like to. Online audience, you can also ask questions by typing them into the YouTube chat. And then Lucy and Hazel will finish the night with some music. So I will get on with introducing Polly Atkin, who is a poet and non-fiction writer living in the Lake District. She's published 3 poetry pamphlets, Bone Song, Shadow Dispatches, and With Invisible Rain, and 2 collections, Basic Nest Architecture and Much with Body. She's also written a biography, Recovering Dorothy, The Hidden Life of Dorothy Wordsworth, and just in case that wasn't enough, she has a memoir exploring place, belonging and disability called Some of Us Just Fall, which is forthcoming this July, which is very exciting. So please welcome to the stage Polly Atkin.
Thank you, Genevieve. Thank you. Hello, Sheffield. Hi, everyone. And hello, world beyond Sheffield, or extra Sheffield world. Or some of you may be in Sheffield, but not right here as well. Hi to all of you. I'm going to read a few poems which talk about who and what we live with when we're living in particular places. And I'm going to start with one which is seasonally appropriate. So this is bluebell season, which is my favorite time of year, pretty much. Bluebell season. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Everything bluebells and you giddy with it, dunking your face in the swell of them in the late light. The cuckoo concealed on the common, the wrens in the bracken, the ravens on the crag, impersonating. The trees talking to you, telling you how much it means to them to be waving their limbs in the high sun, ecstatic. The deer in the small copse staring up at you, drunk with it, as you trot back down to your human life. You're thinking about yourself, divested of the self again. You do it often, putting yourself in second person. What you mean is I wanted it. This bluebell high, the deer transfixed by my human body, unable to move forward or backward until I remove it and its history. You wanted out of it, this alarming body, its scent of harm. You carry it home all the same. And then I was talking just before this outside about the way in which when we know a landscape very well and we move through it regularly, that landscape is overlaid with our own memories, with everything that's happened to us in that place, which is a kind of haunting. So I thought I'd have a little haunted poem, which is called Borders Gothic. And this poem is based on a map made by a Cumbrian writer of boggles in Cumbria. And boggles are kind of ghosts, but they're not just ghosts. They're They can be sensations, so a bogle can be a particular feeling that you can get in a particular place. They don't have to be apparitions, as it were, but they are kinds of hauntings. So this is Borders Gothic. You will meet it as a corner you cannot turn, a gate flung open, a muffled struggle off-road in the woody murk where the old track hums under mulch and brambles. You will be a traveller in the midst, alone. It will throw itself into your bag as a weight so heavy you cannot go on. It will block your path in the body of a bone-white calf or lady, eyes like swollen moons, its voice the splash of stones thrown in deep water. It will howl. It will sit at your feet and sink through the bog of the tarmac with a glug like a rock or a woman being dropped in a mire. It will cry 3 times from the shore. It will carry its coffin or its head or its child in its hands. It will follow you home. It will make you promises. You will try to rid your house of it, the radiant boy of it, heirloom drab of it. You will take it still screaming to see and drown it. You will bury it day after day and find it always back where it started, its lamp casting light through every window, its small skull shrieking, "I know, I know, I know." So there's several poems about frogs in this book, and that's partly because our house is haunted by frogs. I think frogs have a really long memory, a bit like sheep do, that they pass on territories to each other. I looked this up, and they kind of pass on this genetic memory of their ways from their spawning ground to the lake, and they must be very, very long, because our house has been there since at least 1646, the house that we live in, and the frogs want to come in through the front door and out the back door. So they must be remembering several hundred years prior to the current day, their route to the lake. So this is habitats. We chase tiny frogs around the bathroom. We chase tiny frogs around the hall, invisible on the sludge-green carpet in the rainy gloom, invisible in the living room on rental brown. This house is designed for tiny frogs to hide in, but not to survive in. We wake to find dried tiny frogs curled around hot water pipes, perfectly preserved and even smaller. Tiny frogs are everywhere. We cannot put down our feet. We float above them like lilies, opening and closing with the light, casting our shadows deep. And tiny toads are trying to follow where tiny frogs slither with ease, trying to squeeze their awkward bodies under the front door, where a dog once chewed and scratched in desperate abandonment, carving a sliver of a portal. Tiny toads are not agile. They move as though dragging always through mud. When I open the door to release a tiny frog from the cave of my hand in the morning, a row of tiny toads upturned in a split in the wood on the doorstep, stuck. I think they are dead till I flip them over. They come back to life, but the life is feeble. Tiny frogs hop in your hand, work through. Tiny toads sit in your palm's valley, blinking. Tiny frogs are always moving. Tiny toads are always watching, waiting for the moment your primordial shudder turns to Kintenshima. In August, a tiny toad follows me into the lake, and I think that the lesson is over. But then more tiny toads, more tiny frogs, invisible on the sludge green, invisible on the brown. We keep letting them out. We keep trying to save them. But this is their truth. We are floundering. We have sunk to the reeds at the bottom of a forgotten pond we call home, an acropolis of tiny toad ghosts. Oh, poor toads. This is very tragic. Next, I'm going to read a poem from my first collection, Basic Nest Architecture. I'm going to read 2 poems about walking. So you may have noticed I am wearing a filtering face mask, and that is because I am chronically ill. I'm disabled by chronic illness, and I can't afford to get any more ill. So I try to avoid the avoidable illnesses where I can. My conditions are what are called often invisible disabilities. I would question that term, as a lot of people do. Some disability activists use the term non-apparent instead, which puts the emphasis on the person who's not noticing them, which for me feels quite apt. Because as soon as I knew what my own conditions were, I could see similar things in other people. And they're not invisible at all. And neither is pain. I think when you know pain, you see pain in other people. But this poem tries to unpack some of that. And it's called The Invisible. And it's got a little quote at the beginning from Alice Oswald from her poem on Sisyphus. The secret is to walk, evading nothing. Crone's shadow stumbles ahead of me, catching erratic feet on the tarmac, ruched as it is by roots, her left foot sticking as if in mud, her stoop cranked up by the pock-marked skin of the dry stone wall she is thrown on, the angle of light. Sickish orange in the early night, her mouth twitches down at the creases, bitchy resting face, though you cannot see it, dark on dark. You could say she exists in relief, except there is none, not for a structure like her, misbuilt, collapsing inward with each jolt forward. I try to right her, but she will not straighten. The more I struggle, the more she looks broken. She knows more of pain than your charts can trace, but you will not acknowledge her, hear her. Her name is a slur. Her body is carrion. It is too late for this. My blood too sticky. Her edges are blurring. My legs are unraveling. Her gown of bones is clacking, clacking. Will we ever reach home? I sink in my clothes till my breath melts the frost on the empty road. She pushes ahead of me, carries on walking, carries on walking, carries on walking. So that was in my first collection, and from that lots of conversations arose about that process, particularly of being an ambulatory disabled person as well, and what walking may or may not mean to me in different ways. Because I do walk, but with some difficulty, and with particular changing difficulties as well at different times. And out of that, I was asked by Anthony Capildeo and Josie Giles to collaborate with them on a project where we responded to Thomas A. Clarke's wonderful poem in praise of walking, but we also kind of subverted it and wrote our own versions to try and deal with some of the difficulties that each one of us faced in walking. And in some of the So in that poem, walking is presented as something, a democratic activity that everybody can engage in. And there's obviously some problems with that. So this is my part of that, and it's called Unwalking. But I couldn't have written this without Josie and without Anthony, or without Thomas. So this is Unwalking. We cannot set out, not early, no never, no, sorry, I'll start that again. Can't even walk through the line. We cannot set out, not early, no never, even late morning, no, not out, not in the mornings when our enemy gravity is the most possible baggage and the world indecipherable, the body its own most possible baggage, property quite impossible to refuse, to simply walk away from. This is not triviality. It is violence to say to walk is human. Refusal is our greatest blessing. Lightness is not a choice. If I seem to you to be travelling light, it is because the infinite mass of my body is non-apparent to the untrained observer, the dead planet of me. By the time I am visible on earth, I will be nothing but dust and soundless echo. To walk is not humane. Simply, it is not getting. Always, everywhere, people have not walked, veining the earth with unpaths, unlines of desire, so you have called them invisible. No footsteps. Others striked out, entirely ourselves implying to be consumed. There are destinations without journeys, things you will never see if you walk, 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 walk. Waiting is not the opposite of walking. Unwalking is not the same as waiting. I do not have to move to be moved. Are you moved? The body is what I cannot untake with me, what I cannot leave behind, what I cannot not discover continually along the way, what I cannot undiscover, unhook myself from, slip my arms out from like a rucksack, old baggage, old body, bag of rocks I carry with me. My everything. What cannot be lost on a walk, an unwalk, a wait, or ever. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and neither of them were accessible. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I couldn't travel either of them. The future is accessible, the most distant place on an inaccessible road. With every step, it seems to move further, and every step hurts. What is a sensible shoe to a sensible body? I am all sensibility. I feel keenly. To walk is a risk, and my relationship to risk is fractious. I unwalk. I am very sensible. Last time I was told to bring comfortable shoes, I replied, there are no comfortable shoes unless you can bring me a comfortable body. No one offered me a comfortable body. This is what I learned in the course of unwalking. When I spend a day, I feel exhausted, so I pace. A quality of attention, which is an excellent thing. Every dislocation is equally important or unimportant, the joints turning wrong, doubling back in the most lonely places. Unlovely, undemocratic, unreasonable. The line of unwalking is persistent self-interest. We must become experts if the body is to articulate itself, not de-articulate itself. This is not so much unromantic as reasonable. Knees, hips, ankles, wrists are natural halting places. Walking is not so much romantic as unreasonable, the flavor of walking too rare and too extraordinary. Any walk an expedition when to unwalk is quite ordinary, unexceptional, just what we do daily, unwalking in all weathers, every season of the body, unwalking a continuum upon which the least emphatic occurrences are registered clearly. Any stick man, through long use, will adjust itself to the pain. If you're fit to walk, they'll declare you fit to work. There are so many ways through a landscape we cannot choose. The project of an unwalk will be to remain adequate. One continues through effort of will, not fidelity. There is no fidelity. There is no natural span. This is what we have survived. We who unwalk are not without value. We are not without value. We are not without. This is the largest experience we can have. There are walks on which I lose myself, become 2 places. There are walks on which I lose. The horizon grows wider, the hills gather round. They will not return me to myself or at all. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Polly. That was incredible. And I think I'm probably going to dream about boggles, actually. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next reader, Jonathan Davidson, who is a poet, writer and literature activist. He lives in the East Midlands but works internationally. His poetry has been widely published. He's also written memoir and criticism, and his radio dramas and adaptations have been broadcast by BBC's Radios 3 and 4. His most recent poetry collection, A Commonplace, Apples, Bricks and Other People's Poems, is a collection of poems by himself and other writers, woven together with a commentary which questions how poetry is made and exists as the underlying geology of our lives. It's a really wonderful thing to read, and so rare for someone's book to be so open and inviting and bring in all their influences and inspirations, and kind of it's a really beautiful thing. So let me welcome Jonathan Davidson.
Thank you very much. Let's just move that slightly. So for East Midlands, read West Midlands. I spent 20 years in Coventry. I now live in Birmingham. But it's close to the East Midlands, and we go there occasionally. Genevieve mentioned that my book, A Commonplace, has poems by other people, which seemed entirely reasonable because I rarely read my own poems. I often read other people's poems. And the title of this event is about This Land Is Our Land. So I was really pleased to have a reason to read a poem by Mick North. He gave me permission to have it included in this book, and by default, I hope you won't mind that I would read it to you. The poem is called Land. Who loosed the wind in the singing fence wire, in the fence dividing the hill? Who tends the rowan in the fern-decked gill? They will answer you with the strength of the pound and the unfair advantage of high ground. Who sells the berries the field fairs feast on, migrant, Viking, winter thrushes? Who dug the gill where the ringing beck rushes? They will answer you, the law's petrified truth, with broken promises and written proof. Who built the mill where they weave the weather, spin the jubilant roaring waters? Who sets the sleet and the snowfall quotas? They will answer you, with the permission of history and the dead wood of pedigree. Who taught the fox to prowl the rusty bracken where dusk draws fire from his pelt? Who gave the leather for the tackle, boots and belt? They will answer you with unbridled market forces and the fine tradition of breeding horses. Who saw the falcon stoop on the grouse, a sickle blade cut from the sun? Who decodes the signal from the sportsman's flashing gun? Do not listen to their answers. Do not accept their judgment of a sod's worth. Do not let the wicked inherit the earth. That was by Mick North. That deserves applause. Yes. I came across that poem probably 30 years ago, maybe 40, and wrote it out in a notebook, and then subsequently, when I wanted to assemble this book, managed, after a year of trying to track down Mick North and get him to agree to include that poem in this book. I'm now going to read a poem my own, and mine are much shorter, and this one is called Greenwood, and it is about the greenwood, which is, I suppose, a sense of the forest, maybe a slightly archaic sense of the forest, which I play about with here. The greenwood, a nice idea, but no one is going to take to it to escape the law. And what it offers isn't a country of itself, complete with courts and fools. There may be barbed wire and tracks made by heavy plant hauling timber down to yards. There may be signposted rights away for all abilities. The greenwood isn't what it used to be. But stand me in a still, cold, folding clearing, and I will see shades of the old world, the commonwealth of trees. And I'm going to move swiftly on. Another poem, not by me, but by a poet some of you may know, the late Anne Atkinson, who lived just above Padley Woods. And this poem reproduced here by kind permission of both her and my publishers, Smith Doorstop, is available in her collected poems, which are worth buying most definitely, but also in this book. Padley Woods, June 2007, by Anne Atkinson. How the trees love this weather. Slaked hydraulics pulse on full power, their trunks drenched conduits as they lean into the long moment of their fall. Water streams the paths, finds new ways, down and lays washed sand in its wake. Tree roots spreading like knuckled veins over the slopes are terraces of sand and silt. The music of the gorge is white water in constant industry of flow, the brook full of itself and urgent for the river, shifting wood, moving rock, carving stone. At the bridge, the water's hurl is leather brown and heady. On the road, spring erupts and well through tarmac. Streams find their way easy through dry stone walls. The canopy is listening, its tesserae of leaves held out palm up and tapping a morse of rain, more rain, then louder, loud at the brook's full-throated song, clattering, rain, here it is, again, and more of it, rain, more rain. Fantastic poem by Anne Atkinson, I think. And back to a poem by me. When I came to assemble the readings for this event, I was looking for how I'd written about the landscape, and I realised I lived in a small town surrounded by countryside, particularly from my dad with his interest in cycling. We used to go out into that countryside, but we were always people from the town. And so I have this kind of sense of unease about the countryside, or certainly as I experienced it. And this poem is called Pastoral, or Pastoral, some version of that. Always a rogue chainsaw snarling across sodden, down-at-heel fields, and a dog shouting at travellers, the yelp of a 5-bar gate being yanked open or slid shut, and the flashing lamp on the new item of machinery showing its return from behind the hill to the blue corrugated barns after a day's cultivation, and the red sunset foreclosing the unsecured loan of daylight. So it's clear that I have never felt entirely comfortable with the notion of the land beyond the urban setting. I'll read a poem, another one, about fields. I seem to write a lot about fields and lanes, but also feeling uneasy about them. English field. Between the houses at the end of the tarmac lane, hard by the bypass. Factory for hay fever, mill for insects, dead trees grow there, men get the dogs out. A horse is deeply cut, bleeds all night, dies in the girl's freckled arms. Little stream takes the blood home. Foam from the works washes the twigs and whole branches. Little stream picks up, puts down, drinks cans, undergarments, lubricates the dry, breathless field, wets the loam, the clay, and then the shale, and then the sandstone, eventually dig deep enough. When a car may be torched, where a house may be built of bales and babies made, where a farmer shut the gate, may shoot his gun, at the simply splendid sunset, at the kids, and kill a dog in error, mistaking it for a dog. We were not obsessed, we had in our minds as children growing up in my small town that the farmers had guns, and there's a sense that the farmers would shoot us. The farmers weren't going to shoot us, but there was that sense in our minds that somehow we were transgressing because we were going out into the countryside which wasn't ours because we were in the town. And I think I probably got some of this from my dad, who was evacuated to North Wales during the Second World War and worked on a farm, but also always felt, to my mind, like he was trespassing in a way. But he was also wanted to be out in the countryside. He felt that the country was there for him as a factory worker as much as for the people who worked in that factory, the factory of the countryside. But this poem is merely about his inability to read a map. You'll understand what I mean when you hear it. It's called The Back Roads. And he would take the back roads that often led to ploughed fields, barbed wire, farmers with shotguns, and once to a wooden footbridge over a river with a sign saying condemned. We crossed, of course. That was my dad. Where is he now? I swore I wouldn't take the back roads, but here I am, lifting my bike over a stile, wading a ford, crossing a rifle range. Here I am, on the back roads, and that figure ahead, vaulting a 5-bar gate, as one shouldn't. It is my father. So I'll read one more poem about him and then accelerate to the end. And this is about how I saw my father seeing the world changing as he got much older, started to not see so well. His town became a bigger town. The places he recognised disappeared. And this is an imagined version of his final conclusion. Father, I walked with my invisible father out into the fields on the edge of town, but they are gone now. New roads, new names, new people. Dad, stay here for a while, I said, and I'll go and find out what has happened to our lives. He sat on the newly installed bench. And when I returned, furnished with stories of change, I found him utterly dead, his cold eyes on the cold world closed. So many years he had lived here. And then this. His roads renamed. His fields built over. His people coming into view as strangers. And I think I've got time for possibly 2 more poems. Make them short, Jonathan, for goodness sake. Yes. Geomorphology, I believe, is a term to describe the physical landscape. Let's assume it is. A bit late if it isn't. And this is about my landscape, which is the Middle Ridgeway, the border country between South Oxfordshire and North Berkshire. And you know how dangerous border country can be. We have chalk ridges and dip slopes going further south. Geomorphology. Often low-lying and therefore cunning, higher the closer you get to them, paltry to granite, gritstone or limestone people. I like the dry valleys, the winterbournes, the spring-line villages, the ancient tracks, the knockers of flint or flint implements, or as an arrowhead or pocket knife. A chalk hill is good for rolling down. The scarp slope is love, dip slope, old age. Walk it one way or the other, terrible both ways, but different views. And I'm going to finish on this poem about working in a little orchard where I worked from probably 15, 16, up until I was about 19 at different times for a woman called Miss Bolcombe who owned this orchard, and she felt that only certain people could be tolerated to work for her, and an idiot boy was fine. That was me. So I ended up being the sole employee, actually, digging the soil one autumn. And it would help, of course, if I hadn't entirely abandoned my running order and had found the poem. I feel convinced it is here somewhere. It's not in that book, Jonathan. It's in this book. Just talk amongst yourselves while I get here. I'm here all week, sadly. So are you. Sadder too. I should say this book, for those of you who are intent on not avoiding it, also contains the gazetteer. So with the age of directions and, here we go, and the grid references, you can visit Miss Bolcombe's orchard. The vote is now in private hands, so I request you not to break in. And you know, I realised reading this poem, I imagine people dying in the land. Why is that? We will never know. Miss Bolcombe's orchard. I came from the shed where we sorted the apples, not splitting the day but moving through it. And I carried a spade and a fork or a hoe. She was gone down to the top orchard, all her 70 years on the Diddy tractor, with the dogs snapping at grasses. A vapour of petrol settled on the morning. Slicing the friable soil, the spade made the sound of steel on flint, and the frozen loam fractured, sheared at my feet and at my weight, and I was delving as I had been instructed. Only I did not know she was dead then, propped on the tractor, her leather gauntlets gripping the knurled steering wheel, the motor idling. And her mouth was open to release the ghost of the spark of steel on flint that had moved through her, and her unfashionable trees were a lost garden. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. What a brilliant reading. And maybe next weekend we could all go on a mass trespass to Miss Balcom's orchard. Yes, rally. Well, let me introduce our last speaker before the interval. L Kiew is a Chinese Malaysian living in London, working as a charity sector leader and accountant. Her debut pamphlet, The Unquiet, was published by Offord Road Books, and her debut collection, More Than Weeds, which is published by Nine Arches Press, explores the language of migration and how it is used in relation to plant and animal species as well as peoples, and has its roots in the decolonising botany and horticulture movements, which I'm sure we can talk a bit more about after the break. So please give a very warm welcome to L Kiew.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with you all in Sheffield and wherever you are in the virtual world. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion we're going to have later about access, belonging, and outdoor space. Open gardens. My people pass. Abandoned wastelands. Stop to dig and stake. Sift soil into clean beds. My people use earth-spattered tools, a day at a time. Plants wild around ruins. And my people overlook catmint and cardoons, the rough corners, riotous with nettles and snails. My people tolerate fat hen and pig thistle, hands propagate, tongues enjoy. My people thrive, dead head and pot, green into ordered clumps. My people begin to root out abrasive colours among the casualties, bearded iris, red phlox. My people unfold dark, dirt dreams of tendriling, wind drifts of pollen, cultivars bearing bright heads. When my people rise, how easy it becomes to fence what grows, to put closed signs on the gates. So in a number of my poems, I give voice to the plants that were once much loved, much prized, much planted, and which now horticulturalists don't really think very much of. The ones that have escaped from the places they were put into, that have found new places for themselves. And this one's for Kowinski's fleabane. Thank you for collecting me. I know now I was uncultivated, and I wasn't any good against fleas. You forgave me, called me dependable daisy, let me soften edges, carpet stony ground. Thank you for giving me a bed in the rockery, the slivers of space. You appreciated how I bloomed, white arrayed for most of the summer. It seems I've outgrown your welcome, no longer fitting the floral scheme, spilling from understory and onto driveway, wrinkling roots into the tiny gaps I discover. I've heard you talking about me, prolific self-seeder, easy to kill, and difficult to keep out. You gouge clumps, scorch earth, spray glyphosate. I know you're busy. Thank you for not committing enough effort to root me out. My petals uncurl, I'm settled, and my seedlings sprawl out. I love seaside, small cracks. I hate hard winters. Pioneer of disturbed sights, I remain grateful for the wind, the part sun. So since 2020, I've been thinking a lot about who's allowed into our green spaces. Are they really open to all? And the statistics in this poem were ones that I was reading in a lot of newspaper articles in 2020. Tulips. Here are the parks, open to all, where they cherish those companions, flowers, if not all children. Where I thought it would be different, trusting people to be kind. Where 54% are more likely to be fined, commingling. Where breaking. Silence grows where stems harden, split. 1,741 deaths in custody. Bulbs are broken, all ways in this country, and diagnosed, disordered. Plants are breaking, colour streaked, die after being spat on. Newsprints fragile, petals blow apart, bleed underfoot. We're not the virus, the flowers dead in the earth. I cannot breathe. Bodies more than weeds. Vandals. There are green invaders among mothers with bugaboo prams, toddlers scattering bread, not quite in the range of ducks. Parakeets are sacking city trees, squawking over the grey-suited workers with pecking entourages, pigeons scavenging for crumbs. They're feral flash mobs, raiding suburban bird tables, noisome and eating all the sunflower seeds and nuts. It's no wonder that the magpie on its beat like a policeman with powers to stop and search, calls them hooligans, says, send them back. So this next poem quotes from the policy paper National Security and Borders Bill, Deprivation of Citizenship fact sheet, which was published in December 2021. Only in the interests of national security. The Home Secretary decides each case personally. Moon turns away. Cucumbers are shivering. Who likes the trellis and the stake? The gardener prunes and harrows, leaves bone whitened, first fellings, thin trailings. Though we will always try to tell an individual that their citizenship is to be deprived. How fast fronds fall to soil. It might not be possible in exceptional circumstances. The fog leans in, dripping insinuations. even though we've been here before and for a long time. We're only hedge clippings. Because we cannot immediately tell a person that they are to be deprived of British citizenship, fog is one wet slap after another. To the fallen, leaves returned. It does not make the decision any less valid or prevent the deprivation order being made. Dandelions in dirt, plastic zip ties, twine. Processes and safeguards are already in place. On winds moan, a slam shut sound may be left human. We would explain their appeal rights when they make contact with us. How the ground lies. Lilies pretend to know nothing of it. The gardener grows more shadows, grows more silence. How are we to bear branches left for crows? I think I need to give a content warning for the next one. So I don't find the garden a safe space. You might have gathered that. And not everybody in the garden is given equal rights. So this poem is a kidnap poem, but it's from the point of view of the people, the creatures that have been marginalised. We've taken Rosa. We're not asking for a lot, only what we need, and we're as serious as brown trips. Don't tell the head gardener. Rosa's staked, stems tied with twine. Somewhere you won't find her. She's delicate, twigs like fingers torn from a hand. It will be simple to pry her red buds apart, to flower. We won't unbind her until you give us the mulch that is ours. Do this. We're watching. We hope for composure, that it doesn't rain today. If there's the slightest frond spur on the compost heap, we'll thrash her naked of leaf, thin her to strangulated shoots, strung like a fence. We have secateurs, and we'll sever. We'll handle the situation. A spade's a spade. Believe. We are blown dark, our tongues thorn-edged. We won't be kept out of direct light. So I wanted to share a poem from the country of my birth, Malaysia. The title of this poem is The District in the State, that is a district in the state I grew up in. It's also the name of a river. And it's the place where my father ran a field study station when I was a child. Gombak. Wet greeted us everywhere, its green mossiness, earthy and insinuating, between flip-flop and feet, woody drips from the dark canopy, squelching leaf litter. It licked us along the dark corridor, skidding from concrete kitchen onto long veranda and down the steep slope to that sudden sunlit padang and beyond, flowing glints, clean water, swift, and there she was, Sungai, Kakak, capricious sister. She sprayed us with sweet stream scent, skirted soft sandstone, rocks slippery, shoulders undercutting earth banks. Her spirits altered after the rains. Waking us, she grumbled gravel, grumpy at being rushed, bearing the load of overlogging, heavy sediment from up-valley deforestation. Our old white Ford was a rhino, turning reluctantly out of the gate. Its lurch lumber expelled me from forest home to other study stations. Tear-blind, feeling sick, evicted, I looked back to the red-roofed refuge of road-scarred lorrymen, its altar offering oranges and incense, the giant banyan with roots upwards, branches hunched over, weeping. So reflecting on the question of, is this land our land? I wanted to finish with this poem. To live here. The door slammed. I tended a fire, a crackling of acer leaves, a bonfire of flaming herbaris, camellias, azaleas, living flames. I gave what the garden gave. Shrubs, sycamore, long grass, white-faced houses, wooden bench, and laughter from the shade. Into the conflagration I flung myself, petals, language, drifting from the page. Not belonging, longing to live here. And I'm going to finish with this, leaving you with this thought as we go into the break. What I hope is that a poem becomes, between our ears together, in and on our bodies, a land that cannot be owned, though it can be tended, tilled, and touched. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was so intricate and powerful and important. Thank you so much. We're going to have a short break now. Everyone who you've heard read today has books available for sale at the bookstall, and they, I'm sure, will sign one for you during the interval if you so wish. They'll also still be there at the end. So we're going to take 10 minutes and come back in at 20 past. Please, before we go, just give one big more round of applause for Polly Atkin, Jonathan Davidson, and L Kiew.
Winter when the sky is grey, we engine with ditch our times away, but in the summer when the sun shines gay, we go round.
Hello, welcome back. Hope you all had a nice break. Just before we go into our second half, I want to say a big thank you to all the people who've helped make today happen. Theatre Delhi for having us. Have been a very supportive venue, and especially Kira, who's been doing all the tech for us today. So thank you. Thank you to Juliana and Tom, who have been doing the live streaming and enabling our online audience to view the events, and to Stage Text, who are doing the captions. Yay! Thank you to our wonderful festival volunteers. Hooray! And there's so many more people to thank, but it's going to start sounding a bit like a wedding if I carry on, so I think I'll stop there. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to invite Jonathan, Polly and Lisa back up to the stage, and we also have the wonderful Lucy and Hazel. So yeah, bring the others back up. Who you haven't met yet, but who are going to be playing some music for you in a minute. But before they do that, I'm going to just ask I'll probably ask you a question for all of you, and then we'll have some audience questions as well. So I suppose I thought I'd start with, I don't know what I thought I'd start with because my thing's over there, but I'm going to riff. I've been thinking about, during your readings, and this is to all of you, about the way that you kind of can borrow language and take language from other places to sort of make it yours. I know, Polly, you use a lot of like found poetry and other people's words within your writing. Jonathan, you take whole poems from other people and put them in your book. And Lisa, you borrow like a lot of the language of horticulture, and it's almost like, I just wondered if each of you could say a bit about what it means to kind of get into that language and take it and turn it into something that's your own. And Lucy and Hazel, please feel free to add to this as well. Yeah.
Sit down. Do you want to start? Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, going back to the previous panel and what Fran and Inua were talking about with language, I think is really interesting and really relevant. That what you're doing when the language that's available to you is also a language which does violence to you in some ways. So English is my first language theoretically, although I actually made up my own language when I was a kid and had to be speech therapied out of that. And I don't remember any of that because there's no record of it at all. And so my first experience of language was of not being understood as well, which I think is quite fundamental to how I see and experience language. And that process of finding and taking and then repurposing language from other places, to me, is a really important kind of part of resistance, which is what I see definitely in your work as well, of going, no, these terms are not okay, or this way of talking about something is not neutral as well. And I think sometimes that repurposing hopefully does some of that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've long had an obsession with how people talk about invasive species. And, you know, like they got in little boats and they paddled over here deliberately to invade your gardens. And that's not the case. You know, they're here as a legacy of colonialism. They were brought here, and that they've been successful in the land that they've arrived in is, you know, just how nature works. And I've been really obsessed with that. And then as we've had the changes in society that have come recently, I've really noticed how much of that language people use about people.
Yeah.
And so I'm very angry. and I'm very angry about gardens, and I'm very angry about how gardens are places of often quite a significant privilege, and who they belong to, and who they belong, who is allowed to go in and who is allowed to come out. So those things have been kind of really at the heart of my book, and kind of a very long-seated obsession. I think maybe I'll stop there. I'm about to develop a rant.
Well, I don't have a lot directly to add to that, because I don't think my work concerns itself with language directly. Obviously, it is language. I do, with permission, use other people's poems, and that is a relief to me to come across my book and know that it's not all written by me. And it seems odd anyway when you live with other people's poems much more than your own, so why would you include them? And so much poetry is almost very quickly forgotten, not because it isn't good, just because there's so much new stuff. So it's actually a service, I think, to kind of find things which would otherwise be obscured by the weight of constant production that we're all involved in. Yeah, I'll stop there.
What about?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, most of music is nabbing things, I think, really. And it's like, yeah, it's interesting to think about. I think we definitely use language in like a much more direct way, I think, a lot of the time. And as you said, like, so much of language is like damaging, and the amount of time and thought over like how to phrase something specifically and what words like to leave out is like, yeah, it's an absolute minefield, and it's like, which I enjoy troweling over. It's like, thank you. Yeah. I mean, Lucy, you're definitely a big wordsmith. Have you? Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I come from like the English folk tradition, kind of born and raised in that, and I only started songwriting quite recently, and I was like, well, I know folk music, but I don't really want to sing it. I don't have a particular personal urge to sing traditional material. I want to sing about stuff that's relevant now. So one thing that I did is that when I started songwriting was hanging new stories on the kind of coat hooks of the traditional ballad form, and in my head I was like, oh, this is kind of how a song goes. There's a refrain and there's a chorus and it sounds folky, but actually I'm telling you a story about like police or like a piece of activism. And I think for me that's been a really nice thing. Like, there's the language, the deep old language of like song form that I know, but being able to use that, repurpose it, I guess, for like storytelling and like political music. So yeah.
Thank you. And that makes me want to ask, we've already had a bit of a chat about activism today, but I know you guys are quite involved in like the Right to Roam movement and things like that. And maybe perhaps to everyone, like, do you think there's a place for poetry and music in, like, I guess, for affecting social change? And what is that role?
Big question. Yeah, I'll go first and I'll pass it on. Yeah? Well, because obviously, like, you gave us a little idea of what we might be talking about, and we chatted about it. Like, should we go on the panel? And my initial response was like, no, because I don't know enough about it. I will say something wrong. I don't know enough about like the legislation of land rights. I'll embarrass myself. And then I was like, well, but the question is about music and the arts, and it's like, well, actually, what we do, we get up and sing songs. And you only have like 3 minutes in a song, or even, a small only piece of poetry potentially. And what you're not trying to tell everybody the ins and outs of like law necessarily, although you did, and it was amazing. That was amazing. What you're trying to get across is your response to something that you find to be unjust, right? And I think that's the role of music, is just like giving people like the flavor of the injustice, and you can pass it on through the emotion of music without having to like, be combing through all the exact details of what's going on. It's enough to say, this is not okay. It's enough to say I hurt, or I see other people hurting. And I think that's a real amazing power that the arts have, is to just make people feel around a topic, which it definitely does. Yeah.
Lovely. I'll add, actually, because I think for me it's specifically music and poetry, not the arts as a whole, because a lot of the time, as soon as you know, in galleries, a lot of the time the kind of class exclusion of those spaces, and it's such an individual experience. Like, even if you go in a group, it's like, go and look at that thing and then sit in your thoughts. And like, sure, you might have a conversation about it, but like, you know, if you're in a group listening to poetry or music, like a lot of the time that is how, and yeah, sure, that can be also made incredibly expensive and inaccessible. However, like, poetry in itself is like so accessible. Like, even if you can't write, you know, people can speak. And I think, you know, it's in the public forum, it's in the, you know, kind of DIY cultures, all of your communities. That's where those can be incredibly powerful. And you can communicate something that, you know, I'm kind of allergic to news articles, and I read it, like, I engage with stuff that I really care about, but to get me to care about something that I don't already care about is a whole other kettle of fish. That's a definite phrase. Yeah, and so it's like, oh, you know, I've been stood in front of poets and musicians that have sung about something that I would have never thought about, and I'm immediately transported into the emotional space collectively with the people around me, and I think, yeah, that's what does it for me.
Again, I'm going to call up the spectre of the last panel, but I thought what Fran was saying about the lack of equipment you need for poetry, and you could say for writing in general, for able-bodied people, I should say, because that's not necessarily the case for people who are, for example, non-speaking, or who use BSL, for example. There can be different kinds of barriers there, but as far as most of the arts go, it's like the probably the lowest barrier for kind of stepping into it in some ways. For me, though, it's more of a matter of what I can do, and there was a question about direct action earlier as well. So the conditions I live with are energy limiting, as well as many other frustrating things, and I just don't have the energy to do a lot of direct action. So for me, it's a question of what can I do, and what I can do is write about stuff and hope that has an effect. Someone called up the ghastly spectre of the misquoted Auden phrase, "poetry makes nothing happen," earlier, which people always forget is a line from a poem for the starter. And what he goes on to say is that poetry is a way of speaking, a mouth. That's what that poem says if you actually go to the poem, rather than just re-quoting an extract. And I think we have to believe that we can change one heart and mind at a time, otherwise we can change nothing. I think that, for me, that's kind of fundamental to it. And if a poem can do that, then great.
Yeah, I mean, I think my engagement with literature has always been that, you know, it takes you to a new place, it takes you to an experience that might not be your own. And I feel that with my poems. You know, I hope that the reader will meet me halfway and walk to a place they hadn't intended to walk to, and maybe continue that journey beyond. And really, that's probably about, you know, that's all I wish for with my work. So.
Yes, I couldn't honestly say that I write to try and change anybody's views, and maybe I just come from a tradition where poetry is not used for that purpose. I can see in other cultures it can be. I went to a fantastic festival in Nicaragua, and clearly poetry there is used as a means of recording history and of changing minds and of moving politicians, but that's with an enormous listenership and an absolute dedication to poetry, which we don't have in the UK. So I feel, unfortunately, you know, I can feel angry and I write something, and that might make it a good poem or it might make it a worse poem, but I don't feel that the poetry world I have access to, or listeners or readers I have access to, that my work is going to influence them particularly. That's very defeatist, isn't it? But I'm also, having said that, reading Shelley's Mask of Anarchy on the back of the Jams album, sound effects, whenever it was, did make me think, who's Percy Shelley? I should read some of his stuff. So he was doing that, but he didn't know I'd be reading it. Yeah, so I've not given a very clear answer, but I suppose I am. I hope we won't have to rely on the arts to change people's minds entirely. I hope that there'll be other mechanisms in play. And I do read a newspaper from cover to cover every day, so that's how I have my views changed or challenged. And I listen to lots of podcasts with people who give me facts and figures, and that's actually how I want to change my views, is facts and figures. Although poetry is nice for keeping you going, but it's not a good vehicle for political decision making, I don't think. Damn. Sorry.
Can I ask a question back to that? But you want people to feel something when they read your poems, don't you? I mean, that's basically what we're talking about in a fundamental way, is that you want someone to feel something. Or you don't want anyone to feel anything when they read your poems.
So just to say, they won't hear you on the live stream if you don't use the mic.
I don't have a design upon the listener. And actually, my sense more is that I like to produce a small work of art, if it may be, and that gives me some satisfaction. And then it is gone from me and can be carried into anybody else, and they can do what they wish with it to some extent. So I'm not... I suppose I want them... I mean, I write short poems in the hope that people will finish reading them. And that's, I'm hyper concerned about how little disposable time people have got. So give them, the 2-minute poem, the 14-line poem, equivalent to the 2-minute pop song or folk song, because, So, I'm pathetic, aren't I? I really am. I'm absolutely ashamed of myself. I come from a hyper-politicised family, believe me. So I think there's a bit of a reaction against that is, if you're brought up with the Daily Worker and the Morning Star, you don't need to be told about politics. And actually, in a way, literature is a bit of an escape from it. But then on the other hand, you come back around and think, but actually, literature carries lots of those ideas, as Percy Bysshe Shelley did.
Have we got any questions from the audience? Yes. We've lost our... Millie, do you mind doing the microphone? The rover.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, so poetry about nature has traditionally been seen as quite kind of like soft, like kind of feminine, but in an age where we're kind of at a tipping point now in relation to like biodiversity loss and climate change, do you feel a responsibility to kind of subvert that idea around kind of the more pastoral poetry theme?
Who wants to answer?
I think for me, the pastoral theme is really of a time and a place. And if you want to look at the environment globally, you have to look at outside of that tradition. And I don't see nature, and I think a lot of other cultures don't see nature as the garden that was given in the Bible, and I think that's very, very in the pastoral tradition. So I want the plants and the land and the nature in my poems to have equal agency with the people that speak in the poems as well, and that's really, really important to me. And I think that's what shifts the dynamic. I don't think nature is a passive thing that is tended for us or a mirror for us. If we see it as equal value with us, with equal agency, then we might have a little bit more respect for it. Though we don't always do that with people, so maybe I'm a little optimistic, but I really hope that would be the case.
I could give an entire lecture on that subject, but I won't. I mean, what Lisa said, really, that in a way, the view that nature poetry or nature writing or nature is a kind of soft or a bit like actually this issue with poetry generally as well, that it's a kind of non-serious thing, is itself political, and it's created. It's not necessarily a given, and it's not even there in the history, like thinking about, the history of folk songs as well, that the presence of nature in folk songs and folk as a thing has always been political and always been radical and always been about the current moment in some way or another. But I think it's very interesting that there is a lot of discourse that tries to deny that, and I'll leave that there. And do you want to?
I also could talk for a long time on that, but I'm not gonna go for it.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Okay. Yeah.
I think perhaps. Okay.
With climate change becoming such a prevalent occupation of people's minds, do you think that will affect you in your poetic productions in the future?
Well, we can at least forgive poetry in the sense that it doesn't use scarce resources. It's a wonderful thing because any number of people can consume it, and it remains as much wholesome as it was at the start. So that's fantastic. I feel more and more, I suppose, I don't know, unequal to the task really, and feel that, my concern to spend time shaping short pieces of words for a silence, feel there's so much else we should be concerned with. It's unnerving. I don't feel, as I might have done 20 years ago, that poetry and the arts are a way forward. I can see how they can be used for good and to challenge and so on. But I also feel like it's hard to make a case for energy spent on them when I should really be doing something more direct and useful. But like so many people, we don't, we feel locked. It's very hard to break out of the culture of not changing things. So, that's, again, I'm betraying my inability to change things, which I'm sorry about.
I mean, it's just sort of just talk about the work. I mean, I think we just need to keep talking about climate change because it's something that's happening very, very slowly to a certain extent. Like, it's not, for most of us, it's not something that's immediate and tomorrow and on our doorstep. We hear it as this hypothetical 2040 thing. It's a long time. Maybe I just have a very short attention span, but it seems a really long time. So I think we need to keep keeping it in the forefront of our mind, and we need to notice all the changes that are happening, the very slow changes, the changes in range for plants and animals, and the impact that it's having. Most of us won't see the sea level rise, but I think we need to keep bringing that to our attention, because it's only when we notice things do we actually seek to actively change them.
So I'm going to partly answer that by giving another answer to the last question in some ways, and say that the reason, we look back on the Romantics, for example, now, and we think, they're all busy writing about flowers, how fancy of them. And the reason they were doing that was as a response to the Industrial Revolution. So and that kind of idea that suddenly we have to, because there is this idea in writing as well, like suddenly we have to write about climate change. One of my favorite poetry anthologies when I was a kid was an anthology called What on Earth, which was a poetry anthology aimed at children about climate change, which was published in sometime in the 80s. I can't remember when. But the idea that these conversations are new is also like slightly troubling to me in some ways, because there is this like massive continual, as you say, like people can't hold it in their heads. There's a continual forgetting, as with so many things. And then you feel like you're just repeating the same conversations over and over again. So in a way, I'd say that's always been affecting my writing. There's a different question about how it affects the production of that, and thinking about literally the paper that we're using, the water that we're using to produce books. There's a lot of discussions in publishing about how to make book publishing more sustainable. But in some ways, it feels like we're also always kind of like scratching at the edge of something that we're not getting to the real core problem. But I think that's why people fixate on those things, like things like banning plastic straws when actually they're essential aids for a lot of people, because everyone fixates on a picture of a turtle rather than on the real problem. And I think that's one of the main problems of climate crisis for me, is the way that we divert our attention from what really matters to think that we're doing something when actually we're not doing anything. I can't answer how we do something.
I guess there's the continuous point towards the individual, the individual consumer. What's your impact? You as a poet, what's your impact? It's like, and as you said, is that the real picture that we're looking at? And it's like, well, no, not really. It's like the way that we collectively use land and the structures that do that, looking at different ways to produce poetry. Would you then like create more audio like books? And then that also in itself uses a certain amount of energy. It's a kind of, you're looking down an endless cycle of like what we have created, and there's a lineage in that. And actually, I was going to go back to what you said about relying on facts and figures to make political decisions. I actually disagree. I think I can't say the word, you know what I'm saying. Statistics has always been a form of poetry because it's reflective of the society that statistician is particularly in. And like my friend who's like an ecologist and like is also a statistician has been in situations where those remits have been pushed and pressed by the work that they're like in, and many there's a beautiful marine biologist that is referring to poetry and artwork from like hundreds of years ago in order to understand what fish were like, because all of the numbers for fishing rates have changed so constantly that you've lost the lineage, and that's where writing and art becomes the lineage of like human knowledge itself. So yeah, I don't know, I think it's important because it allows us to stop and actually like witness what's happening. And it's a shame that the what do you do now is kind of stuck with higher powers often.
Mm-hmm. Do we need to? I was just going to say, like, I think it's really easy as an artist to feel disheartened, and like your creativity isn't important. You're not chaining yourself to a JCB or throwing paint at a Chelsea Garden show or whatever, and all this. It's part of a tapestry. Like, there's no one way to do activism. There is no one way to solve the climate crisis, and part of that tapestry has got to involve the arts. Like 100%, like people are in pain, people are grieving, people need joy, people need to be reminded. They need to come to a gig or a poetry reading and be like, shit, I forgot about that. You made me feel something, and now I'm going to go out there and like email someone or do something small, or like, I am going to go out and like look at the weeds or whatever and appreciate, because that's all of it is part of a big picture. Like, we have to like remember that. And I feel like sometimes when I get the voice in my head that's like, oh, well, you're just writing songs, like, it doesn't even matter, like, what's the point? It's like, whose voice is that? Who's telling us that the arts are not important and are not part of the movement? I don't want to listen to that voice. So yeah, don't let it get down.
Thank you. What a lovely note to end on. So I'm just going to let you guys set up what you need to, and I'm going to give you a little introduction while you do that. So we are coming to the very last act of today. Lucy and Hazel, who you've just met, are a Sheffield-based folk duo who perform original, provocative, spirit-rousing songs on the melodeon, the guitar, and clarinet. Have you got your clarinet? No. No clarinet. Woven with rich vocal harmony, their music has deep roots in themes of social, land and climate justice, and their songs speak truth and power and tell stories of resistance and hope. So I'm gonna... You ready?
Oh, there we go. Lovely. Hey, great. Yay. Thank you so much. Hi, it's been a really lovely evening, and I just want to chat with you all now, get our teeth into all of these topics about land and nature and weeds and gardening and colonialism. But yeah, it's been really nice to come here and finish off the night. We are Lucy and Hazel. I'm Lucy.
I'm Hazel.
It's Hazel's birthday today. Yeah. Yeah, and we're local. We're from Sheffield, and yeah, Sheffield. And so we write a lot of songs that feature kind of the theme of land justice, really. So we've kind of picked those ones for tonight. And the first song is it comes with a little story. It's a true story about a really amazing piece of activism that our friend did on one of our local reservoirs, where our friend Sabina was swimming nude on their own. Any naked swimmers here?
Oh no, it's
Dead silence.
yeah. Occasionally,
You could admit to it.
Very shy naked
I'm
swimmers.
I'm partial. Sabina was there having a swim in one of our beautiful reservoirs, owned by Yorkshire Water. Obviously, water is privatised. And this was a particular time when the police were doing a lot of patrolling of our reservoirs, trying to stop people swimming. And it's not really because they want to keep people safe. It's because they want to keep Yorkshire Water safe from being sued in case anyone drowns. So it's all that corporate kind of protection. And this policeman comes along and says, "Oi, get out of the water. You can't swim there." And they've got this policeman's got a dog as well. Quite intimidating scene. And Sabina's naked. It's early in the morning. They're alone. And they think, "Oh, I've got to get out of the water because the policeman's here and he's telling me off. But my clothes are they're all the way over there." So they emerge from the water completely naked, and they start to walk to their clothes. And then they notice that the policeman is feeling quite uncomfortable. He goes, sorry. And unfortunately for this policeman, or you always kind of explain this best.
Yeah, Sabina also happens to be an incredibly talented genderqueer burlesque performer.
Whoopsie. Yeah, and so they clocked this. They locked eyes with the policeman and did a sexy walk to their towel. I'm just going to walk.
Every step, the kind of anger was
so
dissipating.
Bold, so brave. And this policeman absolutely freaked out, apparently. And his dog turned on him because she was confused about who was in charge. And he just apologised and walked away and said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I just thought that was amazing, in these little acts of, defiance against these, the authorities. I just thought it was brilliant. So, yeah, I wrote a song about it. It's called Blushing Boys. I'm going to plug the merch now. We've got some really nice little lino cuts that kind of depict what I imagine to be the scene. It's got a bum in it. It's got some pants. The policeman's does not feature because I didn't really want him on there. But yeah, if you're interested in these, we'll be selling those out on the merch table afterwards. Cool, Blushing Boys. Ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. As I walked out one summer's morn down by the waterside, with my high-vis jacket right tidy and my houndel by my side, and my houndel by my side. Well, I'm here to do the good old work of keeping ducks in line, protector of this private pond. Oh, how my badge will shine, shine, shine. Oh, how my badge will shine. Well, it's there I've spied a tender maid alone swimming in the main. Come out, I cried, you lawbreaker. Come out and hide your shame, shame, shame. Come out and hide your shame.
Don't ask me, the creature cried, for I am no maid of fair. I am in fact no human beast. I am your worst nightmare, nightmare. I am your worst nightmare.
Well, the very first step this creature took, they did it with a grin. They touched themselves quite brazenly, and his blood began to thin. And his blood began to thin. creature took, it shook into the core as the water dripped from the creature's eyes. His eyes cast to the floor. His eyes cast to the floor. Well, the final step this creature took so slowly to the towel. Well, the hound, she felt the scales tip, and she began to howl, and she began to howl. Well, the hound, she chased her master back to his checkered van, and hound and creature slipped into where peaty waters ran, 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 where peaty waters ran. So beware, beware, you blushing boys who shake the hand of law, for you could be snared by your own shame, all by the water shore, 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 all by the water shore. Thank you.
Jam.
Thank you.
So this is an excerpt from my least favourite piece of non-fictional writing that was released in 2020, which was the Police Crime and Commissioning Bill. And the Lords decided to take this out because they realised how ridiculous it is. But they recently changed the definition of like what makes an aggressive trespass, and this was one of the things that they were thinking of trying to do but didn't. But I think it's an excellent in to realizing how ridiculous legislation can actually be, like the level of the thought process. And the bill that was actually passed is like incredibly xenophobic and drills in that concept of like public nuisance, as if like general being of a human is something that we can now police.
Is an arrestable
It's an
offence.
arrestable criminal offence. So they were trying to make the act of picnicking from off a public footpath, so you may be walking along and you step off onto private land with intent to picnic. That would then have been a criminal offence, which is quite frankly criminal because like picnicking is the most civil thing you can possibly do. And yeah, I wrote this song because I thought it'd be a helpful in to people that may be like, oh, well, there's a lot of policy stuff, but it's just like, it's actually, sometimes it's worth reading about politics because politicians are kind of hilarious and really unhinged. And like, if you've run out of soaps to watch, it's also another great space of entertainment and despair. So yeah, this is the Jam Sandwich song. We are the Jam Sandwich walking from. We have come to sing our Jam Sandwich walking song. We're doing the time for stepping out of line. Now please tell us, please, what we did wrong. Your fleeces are red, the cows find it alarming. Your jam the colour of blood, you know it is disarming. You pick the most violent of sandwich kind and expect me to learn. You cross my line. We are the painting walking throng. We have got to sing our painting walking song. We're doing the time for painting out the lives. Now please tell us, please, what we did wrong. You stride out with your easels, you'll disturb the local weasels. The risk of smattered paint on my meadow makes me faint. Such a toxic way to spend your time. You will poison my life with your turpentine. We are the floaters walking from. We have come to sing our floaters walking song. We're doing the same for polluting out of line. Now please tell us, please, what we did wrong.
over. They'll reroute this old river. You play with terrible timing. Oh, you'll stop the sun from shining. You pick the most gentle of instrument kind, and you dare disturb my peace of mind. We won't sit in jail and fester. We have nothing to confess to. We are not trespassers. We are just the same as our own predecessors. We are not aggressors. This land is just land. This land is just land. We are the people's walking throng. We have come to sing our people's walking song. We'll do no more time, for walking is just fine. We'll walk where we walk, for we belong. This land is just land. This land is just land.
Thank you.
Cheers. This is a song that actually kind of reflects what we were chatting about from your question about climate change. I wrote it as a sort of reflection, nostalgia, I guess, on the different environmental spaces that I've existed around. I grew up in a little village, and I walked the same path for like the first 18 years of my life, and it was along a load of nice kind of sandy walls, and whenever I used to walk to school, it was like getting like bombarded by bees. There were so many of them, like squirreling away, being away in the walls.
I think bees can squirrel.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
They were squirreling away in the walls, and it just, it really moved me. I think how time after time, this changed, and I really saw that because I was there the whole time. Mm-hmm. So this song is called Waltz of the Wind, and I think that's all good.
Generations capitalized on technology's past. And all the leaves, they are dancing on the walls of the wind, the walls of the wind. Can the sun come out shining on a bright tomorrow, rebalancing the suffering and sorrow? Will the waltz swing us back in? Will the wind blow us back in? No. Autonomy is bound to win. Instead of sitting, waiting, wishing we'll all stop doing, filling up that pool that never quite trickles back down. Will it ever trickle back down? Will it ever trickle back down? Back to when we walked and the waters were gurgling down to the rock where the fountains roar. And all the leaves, they are dancing on the walls of the wind, the walls of the wind. Oh, the walls of the wind, the walls of the wind.
Thank you. Wake up. Oh, do you want to stand up with the... Thank you.
I just realised we've got them going. That's nice, isn't it? Ah,
that
we've
is
got
really
captions.
nice. Oh, awesome.
Yeah, do you want to? How many more do you want? How tired is everyone? I mean, it's a long old
We've
time,
got
isn't it?
2 more planned. Does that sound
yeah.
good?
Yeah,
Awesome. This is our Shirley Bassey moment because we're going to get up and stand with our microphones. Or maybe we could just do it like this.
They're wireless as well. Ooh. I can sing like this. Sorry.
Yeah, you do that, Hazel. You do whatever you want, babe.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we should sit down and then stand up. No. Okay, sorry.
change.
Banter aside.
It's your song, yeah.
Oh yeah, we're doing my song. Great. We're doing 3 of mine in a row. Some songs visit me. Basically, I was driving my van, and I was like, a song is knocking on my brain. Quickly do some illegal phone use. Don't save this for the police. And I managed to press record and then sent it to Lucy. And we spent a little bit of time deciphering the words out, this very loud van hum. And at some point, when we get slightly more egotistical, I'll create a like surround sound, it being in my van experience. Yeah, I'm gonna just so you can really feel where the song came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called, what's it called? It's quite new.
Wake Up From Your Sleeping.
Wake Up From Your Sleeping, lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's called Wake Up From Your Sleeping, and I think you'll probably get the gist. It's in G, yeah, not C. Yeah. Yep.
Comfortable?
Yeah.
Wake up from your sleeping and take hands to hold. And your friends keep you better, your lovers stay cold, and find family for others left on the wayside, and take care of each other. We're all gonna die in the waste pit of all that we built up in concrete, and all the community stuck on your phone, and we'll die all for nothing to pay the expenses of tax haven cowboys with private jets. Wake up
from your sleeping. The papers don't lock you in cages like we have been lied to for ages. For we are to die for the sake of the sheep. I will not follow you no more or fall to sleep. Wake up from your sleeping, for nobody's coming to save us from the cold and the land we betrayed, just as we built the structures all after the war. And the traumatized brothers and sisters and all that could waste all the technology that we learned, and just build and keep building and take from the others. We'll die all for nothing if we're sleeping so long, staring at pages and feeling forlorn of the cold dying fire of a great nation's fall. And the nation's only great if you ignore the all that we burn, we burn, we burn. We burn, we burn, we burn, we burn, we burn, we burn. Thank you. Do you want to do some singing?
How nervous is everyone feeling?
Yeah, go on then. So this is our last song. So yeah, thanks so much for having us, and thanks to all the beautiful poets that came before. I feel very moved and energized. Yes, I feel energized in my activism from this evening, so thank you. This last song is called If I Gave You a Tenner, and it's something that I wrote inspired and angered by the kind of battle that's going on Dartmoor. I don't know if anyone's aware of what's going on. Some nods. We did a gig in Bristol last night, and everyone in the audience was like, yeah, right to Rome, like the stars are ours. So Dartmoor was the last place in England that you could wild camp, and it's like crumbs, isn't it? It's like little crumbs. We were allowed to wild camp in one tiny corner of this country, of this land that we live in and are of and breathe the air and tend and everything. You know, we have permission in one tiny place. And someone called Alexander Darwall, who is, you know, a bit of a hedge fund manager. He is a hedge fund manager.
And investor.
I'll not say too much about him, but he wants a very big garden and he doesn't want anyone camping in it. So he managed to make it so that it was no longer possible for people to wild camp on Dartmoor. But thankfully it is going to court, or is already in court.
Yeah. Great.
So there's a real good pushback, loads of amazing activism of people defending their right to this last little corner. And the whole thing just enraged me because obviously we care about land rights and access to nature, and it just felt so like pitiful that we're like, this is all we've got left. Like, you look at Scotland over the border and there's amazing access to nature and the right to roam. You can camp anywhere, you can wild camp, you can climb, you can swim, and people are entrusted with the land. And we're just not. We're just assumed that we're going to litter, youths are going to come and, make a mess.
No guardianship is being passed down because the fences are too high. It's like, if you have any European friends, they come and visit you and they're like, what? I mean, a lot of other different countries as well, not just Europe, it's like, what is happening? So it just pissed me off. So I wrote this song, and the kind of premise is like, what next? And how much are you going to make me pay to access the land that we all was stolen from the people hundreds of years ago? Let's not forget that. Don't make us pay. Don't make us get a permit to sleep under the stars. Thank you very much. Have you got the note? Are you teaching it?
Or you want to learn the chorus? Okay, so I forgot. I just talked for too long. The chorus goes like this. I will not be a tourist nor a customer.
I will not be a tourist nor a customer.
I will not say I don't belong.
I will not say I don't belong.
And if we need a permit just to sleep beneath the stars,
And if we need a permit just to sleep beneath the stars,
we're forgetting what was ours and what they've done.
we're forgetting what was ours and what they've done.
And something's wrong.
And something's wrong. Should we do that all together
Yeah.
now? Yeah, just go do a little practice run.
I will not be a tourist nor a customer. I will not say I don't belong. And if we need a permit just to sleep beneath the stars, we're forgetting what was ours and what they've done. And something's wrong.
It's going to be a whole choir by the end
Gorgeous,
of it.
you got
I
that
know.
real quick. Have
Yeah,
we
yeah.
dropped? Are we still?
Gorgeous. Well done, everyone. We're all in tune. I thought you were just going to panically stroke the plant for a second then.
If we gave you an inch,
Would you sell it back by the mile? Facial recognition
on every fucking style? If I gave you a tenner, would you let me touch the earth, forage for freedom? Would you tell me what it's worth? Could you tell me what it's worth? I will not be a tourist nor a customer. I will not say I don't belong. And if we need a permit just to sleep beneath the stars, we're forgetting what was ours and what they've done. And something's wrong. If I gave you a 20, could I buy a sense of place, ancestral connection, neatly wrapped in lace? If I gave you a 50, would you let the others in just for 5 minutes to watch the setting sun, to watch the setting sun? I will not be a tourist nor a customer. I will not say I don't belong. And if we need a permit just to sleep beneath the stars, we're forgetting what was ours and what they've done. And something's wrong. If I gave you nothing, would you padlock all the walls, barbed wire the sacred places, and police patrol the tours, soundproof the bird song, pull a blind across the sky and tell us that we can't come in? Well, I'd like to see you try. I'd like to see you try. I will not be a tourist nor a customer. I will not say I don't belong. And if we need a permit just to sleep beneath the stars, we're forgetting what was ours and what they've done. And something's wrong. We've traveled so far just to feel as we are. We've traveled so far just to feel. We've traveled so far just to feel as we are. We've traveled so far just to feel. We've traveled so far just to feel as we are. We've traveled so far just to feel. We've traveled traveled so far just to feel. Oh, great work. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely gorgeous impromptu choir. Well done, everyone.
Thank you so much. That is the end of today's event. You've been a brilliant audience. You have as well online. If on your way out anybody feels like adding their name to the mailing list or even filling in a feedback form, that'd be great. Otherwise, please do come back tomorrow. If the building is still here. We've got the launch of a new anthology with Sheffield mental health charity Sheffield Flourish. We've got the Poetry Business New Poets Prize. We've got the Brainwaves Navigating Our Mental States event, and we've got the Sheffield Showcase closing party. So round of applause again for everyone who's read tonight. Jonathan Davidson, Polly Atkinson, L Kiew and Lucy Hazel.